We've been watching the evidence at the state capture inquiry about the state security agency. It has been nothing short of jaw-dropping. Apart from the money, 3 ministers have also been fingered for actively aiding the collapse of the organization during former President Jacob Zuma's years. The trio, says the witness, Ms. K, enforced Zuma's political interest in the running of the agency. I want to try and break away from the minutiae very quickly and maybe give you some sense of the proportion and the scale of this alleged theft and hijack. I'm going to talk to Hennie van Vuuren. He is director of the organization Open Secrets. Hennie, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you. It's maybe just the sheer size and audacity. Have you been shocked by the numbers?
Extraordinary. I think, as you say, we're speaking of amounts of up to 9 billion rand that effectively has, if you like, gone missing, been stolen. And we talk about a culture of practice which suggests the criminalization, certainly within the state, but of the state security agency in particular. So effectively, the spy agency was turned into a criminal entity acting in the interests of people like Jacob Zuma and his political interests, but clearly benefiting our entire patronage network who feasted off the secret funds, which were part of a culture that Zuma had inculcated and set up when taking office as president about 10, 12 years ago, and this culture of secrecy, which I think he really pushed hard when taking office as president.
Can you address that culture of secrecy a little more closely, perhaps? What circumstances prevailed that allowed this takeover to happen?
Yeah, certainly. Jeremy, I think recognizing firstly, of course, there are strong echoes with what happened under apartheid and the way in which funds were effectively stolen and looted and laundered by the intelligence agencies who were effectively almost the law unto themselves, and obviously acted in the support of the National Party regime. A very different system which we tried to fix in the 1990s and 2000s. But I think we started to see, even in the late Mbeki period, in the desire to cover up the crimes of the arms deal, saw, I think, the first moves really towards the potential politicization of the intelligence services. And then, to your question, when Zuma is elected as president of South Africa, very soon after taking office, we see the first discussions around the so-called secrecy bill emerging, a law which was proposed now 10 years ago, which was threatened to ensure that investigative journalists and others wouldn't be able to continue their work. Civil society organizations quickly formed. There were the Right to Know campaign and others came about. Journalists, Sanef and others, spoke out against this law, as well as COSATU then as a trade union and many others. But those, I think, were the important seeds. We saw a potential culture of secrecy and the resurgence of the securocrats, those that were very central to the core of P.W. Botha's administration, now looking very different. But that culture was back in business, and so this hasn't arrived. The idea that this was taking place shouldn't be seen as something completely new to South Africans who are aghast at this. We knew 10 years ago that the political leaders were trying to put such a system in place.
And as we speak in 2021, are we able at all to quantify the damage to the security establishment right now?
Well, I think, Jeremy, the first point is, what is the damage to ordinary South Africans? Because this is seen very often as a kind of a spy versus spy game. But I mean, the real question here is, how has this impacted the human rights of ordinary South Africans who've been spied upon, who've been lied to, who've had money stolen that should have been spent on basic public services? And so that's point one, why these crimes need to be investigated, and everybody who's implicated need to be prosecuted for their crimes. These aren't necessarily spy games. This is direct criminal behavior that we can identify. But in terms of the state's ability and capacity to do the work that we would expect of it, to be able to target sophisticated organized crime rings, to target people who are involved in a range of criminal and nefarious activity, and frankly, networks who are involved in other forms of state capture and corruption over the years, most of that was neutralized. And so you have instead of having a professional security service in terms of state security, which supports the tenets of democracy and the interests of all South Africans, and identifies threats and ensures, through the executive, that there's action, and those if you like, those threats are further investigated by the police and ultimately prosecuted by the NPA. You rather ended up with this very blunt instrument that we have right now, and that was inward-looking, realized. And I must add, Jeremy, I think, we are not yet convinced that we're out of the woods here. When we see Minister Ayanda Ndlodlo this week trying to block the very courageous public servants like the Director General who came out and spoke this week, and others from doing so, and she first wanted to invite them for tea to understand what they were planning to present to Judge Zondo, it sends the wrong message. It sends the message of politicians who are trying to bully whistleblowers. And I'm very glad to see that Judge Zondo ruled in favor of openness this week to ensure that we could hear this testimony.
Hennie van Vuuren, I just want to circle back very quickly to the money. This is what Judge Raymond Zondo said. That is a lot of money. I quote him again. How could a government department not be able to account for 9 billion rand? He goes on to say, with 9 billion, imagine what you could do for people. And that, Hennie van Vuuren, is the tragedy of the entire thing.
Absolutely. I think, Jeremy, when we think about a government that scrambles to find money for vaccines, for COVID-19, about people who are suffering today, who don't have jobs, who don't have housing, that is where that money should have been, and not in the pockets of a small band of corrupt officials and others. The question to President Ramaphosa and others is, when is he going to fire people like David Mahlobo, and when is he going to ensure that charges of corruption and other crimes are instituted against him, against Jacob Zuma, and the entire network of spies? Enough of this palace politics. We need to see accountability given the impact these crimes have had.
I just want to slip in one final question, if I can. We've heard from the acting State Security Agency Director General, Loyiso Jafta. We're also listening to Ms. Kay speak, and again, she will pick up her testimony after 2 o'clock this afternoon. How much credence do you lend to that testimony? Are you absolutely convinced about the veracity?
Well, I think, none of us are working in these agencies and have full access to all the information. I think the more that gets out, the more we are able to try and verify some of the information that's made available. Very clearly, and I think this is important, is that when we look at the evidence that Sydney Mufamadi presented at the beginning of this week, and much of which has been substantiated by Loyiso Jafta as the Director General within the department, and of course through the other anonymous witnesses later on in the week, that high-level panel that Sydney Mufamadi led included lawyers and academics of integrity, and they produced a report which was handed to the president, more than 12 months ago. And so I think that, there's been a range of people who have looked at the evidence that was presented, and really what we're seeing this week is much of that evidence that was in that high-level panel report being presented, and of course with further detail. So I think we are arriving closer to the truth. I think that we need to see far more of the information concerning the nature of these networks being presented. We need whistleblowers to come out and to speak out, precisely because it's only going to be openness that will challenge this criminal culture that's developed within the SSA.
And hopefully, Hennie van Vuuren, this is a start, Director of Open Secrets. Thank you very much for joining me on Friday lunchtime.